Today, we're going to Williamsburg, Virginia in 1933. This city was the capital of the Virginia colony in the 1700s and played a significant role in the American Revolution. While this town is most famous for its colonial heritage, the early 20th century brought important developments that reshaped the community. Today, we'll explore what Williamsburg looked like in 1933 by looking at the Sanborn Fire Insurance Map. I'll highlight several key locations that you can still recognize today. Sanborn Fire Insurance Maps are a wealth of interesting information. I want to also spend some time in this video showing you how I find some of these locations in the maps. Together, we'll see how the colonial revival movement, the Great Depression, and the vision of preservationists all came together to transform Williamsburg into the living history site we know today. Before we step back into 1933, I want to take a brief moment to review why Williamsburg is an important historical city for those of us who might have forgotten some of the details about this city from our middle school history class. The city is most famous for its role as Virginia's colonial capital from 1699 to 1780 and for being part of the historic triangle along with Jamestown and Yorktown. Today, Williamsburg has a population of about 15,000 people, but in 1933 it was home to roughly 3,800 residents, according to the Sanborn map. Williamsburg is associated with famous people such as President Thomas Jefferson, who studied at the College of William and Mary, and Chief Justice John Marshall, who also attended the college. In more recent times, actress Glenn Close, who I first remembered as Cruella de Vil in 101 Dalmatians, grew up in the area and also attended the College of William and Mary. In 1933, Williamsburg was going through a historical restoration funded by John D. Rockefeller Jr. John Jr. was famous for his real estate holdings in Manhattan, New York, and his philanthropy. Besides his work to reconstruct colonial Williamsburg, he was also known for the development of the Rockefeller Center in Midtown Manhattan, which houses many businesses, including NBC. The restoration work of Williamsburg had begun just a few years earlier in 1926. Teams of historians, architects, and craftsmen were carefully studying original documents, archaeological findings, and surviving structures to ensure authenticity. The town itself was still a small community of just a few thousand residents, many of whom lived and worked around Duke of Gloucester Street. The Great Depression started just 4 years prior to this map being drawn. Like the rest of the nation at this time, Williamsburg was affected by the severe economic downturn and people needed jobs. This made the restoration work especially valuable, and residents often found themselves part of the effort, whether as laborers, artisans, or caretakers of the newly restored properties. During this time, the Governor's Palace was being restored. The Governor's Palace had been the official residence of the royal governors of the colony of Virginia after it was built in 1706. The main house was destroyed by a fire in 1781 and was rebuilt on its foundations during the 1930s as part of the colonial Williamsburg restoration. When looking at page 3 of the Sanborn map, we find the Governor's Palace at the north end of the palace green. What is interesting about this particular building on the Sanborn map is that it shows in parentheses the word shrine. Shrine is not a typical Sanborn abbreviation or symbol. In this instance, it refers to this building being rebuilt as part of the reconstruction effort. In other words, it was not going to be a typical building that would have been designated in a Sanborn map as a dwelling, flat, apartment, or store. It was going to serve as a museum. The map itself indicates the building is, quote, built in 1933, which further shows this is the reconstructed building and obviously not the original. The outhouses and sheds around the palace are labeled as buildings that are currently vacant but will become shrines as well. Looking at the Google satellite image of this area now, we see what looks like most of these buildings are still present, along with a significant amount of green landscaping and gardens. 2 blocks away at 331 Duke of Gloucester Street stands Bruton Parish Church. This church is a well-known historical landmark of the Williamsburg area and has been designated as a National Historic Landmark for its significance in colonial history and religious architecture. The church was founded in 1674 as a parish of the Church of England. During the colonial era, this church was the only church and legal religion in Virginia. After the American Revolution, the church's denomination shifted from Anglican to Episcopal. The building that is currently at the location of this church was built in 1715 to replace an earlier brick building which was in poor condition. As shown on page 2 of the Sanborn map, the building is colored red, indicating that it was constructed of brick. You can also see in the Sanborn map that the church has a distinctive cross-shaped layout. The Bruton Parish Church had assigned seating, which some people at my church seem to think we also have. The pews and benches were assigned by social rank, and the colonial government's representatives were assigned to sit in the arms of the cross. The pews had little gates that would latch, which was supposed to help keep out the drafts. There was also an ornate throne-like chair with a footstool surrounded by red velvet benches that was reserved as the governor's pew. I had a difficult time finding very many good photos of the inside of this church, but I came across a video that showed the inside. I'll list the link to that video in the description below. During the Restoration era, special attention was given to its preservation. Parishioners continued to worship there even as architects studied its structure and furnishings to ensure accuracy to its colonial form. The churchyard contains graves of prominent Virginians, providing a reminder of the city's colonial past. In the 1930s, Bruton Parish was both a functioning parish church and a centerpiece of the restoration effort, reminding everyone that Williamsburg was not simply a museum project, but a living community. The Sanborn map from 1933 marks its footprint clearly, underscoring its importance at the heart of the town. Also located on Duke of Gloucester Street was the Raleigh Tavern, which had a special role in the restoration of Williamsburg. Originally built in the 18th century, it was a gathering spot where Virginia patriots met to discuss resistance to British rule. Although the original tavern was destroyed by fire in 1859, archaeologists uncovered its foundations in the late 1920s. Using these findings and period records, the building was reconstructed in 1931 and opened to the public in 1932. By 1933, it stood as the first completed reconstruction project in colonial Williamsburg. On the Sanborn map, the tavern shows up on page 4, and just like the Governor's Palace, it is also listed as a shrine. But just a quick note, going back to the Bruton Parish Church, it did not have the shrine designation since at that time, as today, it's an active church that holds weekly services for its parishioners. So going back to the Sanborn map of the Raleigh Tavern, it's colored in yellow, meaning the building was wood frame. Looking at Google images of the tavern today, we can easily see this L-shaped building does have wood siding, and there have been more buildings added around this tavern since 1933. Unlike other restored taverns from that time period that were reopened as restaurants or bed and breakfast, the Raleigh Tavern is now open as a museum. Before we go to our last stop on our tour of Williamsburg in 1933, I wanted to share with you a quick tutorial on how I find locations on Sanborn maps. It's really similar to navigating any other map, but it does take a little bit of practice to gather your bearings when you first look at a Sanborn map. I think looking at this 1933 Williamsburg map is a great example to start with, since this map only takes up 8 pages, so by Sanborn map standards, it's on the small side. Most of the Sanborn maps that are available online are archived at the Library of Congress. Several state university websites also house images of these maps, but I found the highest quality maps are with the Library of Congress. So on each Sanborn map, you will have the index map, which shows the entire area of the city at that time. Some of the larger cities will also have a title page with beautifully written text and flourishes. This was one of the reasons that I fell in love with Sanborn maps, because you just don't find that level of detail and passion for work in many things produced today. Since the city of Williamsburg in 1933 was so small, there is no need for a title page. So all of that relevant information about the city, like the population, the names of the county and state, the date the survey was done, and the copyright information, it was included on the top right corner of page 1. Since the Sanborn maps were used for fire insurance purposes, Each map includes pertinent details about the water facilities of the city, the fire department, and any other details that would be relevant to an insurance company assessing the risk of fire in an urban area. The key of the Sanborn map lists the color codes used for building materials, with red indicating a brick building, yellow for frame, and so on. There are also details about sprinkler systems for buildings and whether they use gas or electricity. Seriously, the amount of details in these maps is incredible. The next thing you will find on the Sanborn maps is the index, which lists the street names and points of interest similar to a phone book. This is how I was able to find the buildings we talked about previously in this video. I would look up the address on the index and it would indicate the page number that contained that address. If I wasn't sure about the address, I would look under the special section for the name of the business or church. Some of the streets were a little bit tricky though, since one side of the street would be on one page and the other side of the street would be on another page. So, for example, maybe the houses with odd street numbers would be on one page, like page 5, and then the houses on the other side of the street with even numbers would be on page 6. Once you go to the page, it's just a matter of scrolling around and finding your address. When you found the address you're looking for, you can see the color of the buildings and cross-reference it to the key on the first page to understand what building materials were used, how many stories were in the building, if there were any outhouses or servants' quarters, and even if the property had a cistern or a well. For the Sanborn map of my home, which I have up here on my wall, I found that in 1920 my house had a stable in the backyard. Currently, there's a giant oak tree standing there, so that stable must have been demolished shortly after the survey was done of my home. For some of the larger cities, they will have a correction record on the front of the map. Sanborn maps were done roughly once a decade, depending on the city size. This is where surveyors would initial and date if corrections had to be made to the map and on which page. This is because Sanborn maps were so expensive to make. You had the employees who would physically walk the area and take detailed notes of the city. With those notes, the maps would be drawn and color coordinated by other employees, and it was a labor-intensive and time-consuming task to make these Sanborns, which most of the cities in America have a Sanborn map. So when an update like new buildings in the downtown area were built or a new neighborhood was developed, these would have to manually be added with literal cutting and pasting over the top of the paper map. I also like to remind people that not all buildings or homes were listed on Sanborn maps. These maps were used by insurance companies to assess fire risk, so a home in a sparsely populated neighborhood or a farmhouse or a large rural estate would not necessarily show up on this map. I give a great example of that in my Asheville video with the Biltmore estate. I definitely recommend watching that video because there was a lot of interesting things going on in Asheville, North Carolina in 1913. I'll include a link to that video below. Williamsburg, Virginia is also known as being a college town. The College of William and Mary was founded in 1693 by King William III and Queen Mary II. Today, Williamsburg population is 15,000 with over 900 staff that work at William and Mary, plus almost 10,000 students. Now, obviously, not all of these people live in Williamsburg, but the university is still a big part of the city in much the same way as it was in 1933. The College of William and Mary is shown on pages 2 and 6 of the Sanborn map. Brown Hall, a girls' dorm, is shown on page 2. It's color-coded as a brick building with a single-story porch that faces South Boundary Street. Page 6 shows the majority of the campus in 1933. It shows many dorms and halls, the library, the president's home, administration building, the infirmary, and the Trinkle building, which was a dining hall with a kitchen and a bakery sandwiched between 2 dining rooms. Page 6 of the Sanborn map also shows the Wren building, designed by Sir Christopher Wren's followers. Wren is famous for being one of England's greatest architects, designing the St. Paul's Cathedral and several other churches and secular buildings in London after the Great Fire of 1666. The Wren building is the oldest academic building still in use in the United States. I think that's amazing. By 1933, the college was expanding and modernizing, adding new dorms, classrooms, and athletic facilities. At the same time, the New Deal brought the Civilian Conservation Corps to Williamsburg. In the fall of 1933, a CCC camp was established at nearby Lake Mautauquua. Young men employed by the program built trails, recreational areas, and a boathouse with the goal of improving both the college and the community. Williamsburg in 1933 was a small community that was undergoing a restoration effort that would ultimately transform it into one of America's most visited historic sites. By reviewing the Sanborn map of Williamsburg in 1933, we can connect the distant past of the city's origin to the more recent past of the 1930s to the present day. Many of these buildings have been standing in their same locations for hundreds of years, which I find impressive for any U.S. city, especially when we see so many older buildings in other cities that get demolished, oftentimes to make room for parking lots or high-rise buildings. I give a few examples of this in my video of Old Austin in 1900. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into Williamsburg's 1933 landmarks. I learned so much about this city while researching for this video, and I hope that I did it justice. If this city really resonated with you on a personal level, I would love for you to check out the print of this map that I have available at my shop. That way you can hang a bit of history on your walls and have some stories to tell with it. I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me again as we continue uncovering American history one map at a time. As always, thanks for stopping by.